Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejohn. How you doing, Siege?
I'm doing good. What?
I'm
That's
doing.
you
I'm
sounded
doing
what? You
good.
sound like we got to get down to business.
No, no. Well, we started a little bit late, and like by a little bit late, like 15 minutes later than usual. And part of that is my fault because I lost track of time watching Suits LA for a recap. And then also I was thinking about the other stuff we're going to talk about. And then I have to start with the story, but that story begins with a question. That question being the title of this episode. Sejohn Sarowick, Donald Blake wasn't a dentist, was he?
I I don't.
This is
I'm
the best
sorry.
response to that question I could have gotten. Befuddled Sejohn. Who, like, Siege,
Yeah,
do you know who Donald Blake is?
I can't pull that one out of my ass right now, Dev. No.
Okay, that's fine. Donald Blake was the human host created by Odin for Thor in the 616 universe. Remember how Thor used to
Okay.
have a, like, secret
Right.
identity of Donald
Right.
Blake?
Right. And would
Dr.
have to like
Donald
hold
Blake?
Mjolnir into the air to like turn into Thor or some shit,
Yeah,
right?
he had to say, like, some magic word. I think he had to be like, Shazam! And he would become... No, it's not that. What did he do? Yeah, the Odin Force. It doesn't say what his little catchphrase was on the page. This is a weird question. It's an out of pocket question. That's why, like, I just needed to rush through it. I needed to get right to it because I knew, or I at least semi anticipated your response of, who the fuck is Donald Blake?
Well, I couldn't stop thinking of Robert Blake. Wasn't that dude's name from the Jinx?
I think so. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's where my brain went.
So here's the story. I got a root canal on Friday. And then I was supposed to see Novocaine while on Novocaine, but I ended up not being in a mood for Novocaine because it started to wear off just as the movie started and my mouth was in amazing pain after the root canal. But we're not here to talk about the movie I didn't see. We're here to talk about the root canal because it was kind of an amazing experience that led me to question whether or not Donald Blake was a dentist. So I get him, right? I have an 8:30 appointment to get a root canal because if you're going to get a root canal, why not let it ruin your entire day? I say that I actually like the dentist. I know that everybody is like afraid of that. I enjoy my time at the dentist, but I get in the chair and the assistant for the root canal puts on Disney Plus, and I'm sitting there like, oh man, what is she gonna put on? Because there's like 90% of what's on Disney Plus I think would be okay background noise for a root canal, but that
Uh-huh.
dreaded 10%, I was convinced that's what she was gonna choose from. So,
Just the live action Chip and Dale movie going in the
oh my
background as you're
god,
getting a
how
root
terrible
canal.
would that be? Also, some of the like if Bluey were on, I have no qualms with Bluey. I don't want to get a root canal to Bluey in the background. I couldn't do it. I just got to be honest.
I
Um,
mean, I gotta be honest. I'm not a big fan of the watch this while you're getting a root canal thing. I'm a bigger fan of the listen to this. I got some work done once when I was a youngin, and they let me pick like a podcast to listen to or something like that, or like an audio book if I remember correctly.
and that's fine. The problem is, and this is not a problem. I love my regular hygienist. I absolutely love that she listens to 80s music while she's doing my like pre-exam and the cleaning and everything. But I really like 80s music and I like to sing. And it's difficult to sing when you have someone in your mouth, right? Ask any hippo. It's the reason there's a shortage of hippo vocalists in the world. And it's because that little bird's cleaning his teeth. And you only lose
Oh,
3 or 4 birds before you realize maybe I'm
before
not
the
going to
song is
sing.
gone.
But yeah, and I enjoy it, but it is one of those things that it's a little difficult to dissociate when like the other part of my brain is turned on like, oh, but we like this song. We should be singing along to this song. Like a lot going on. So the idea of something on in the background and not being the one to choose it semi all right with me, right? They're going to put on something for them, but I was fearful that it would be something that I would not jive with. So she's going through, and then she picks the Marvel section, and I'm like, all right, good. This is good. There's like 4 things in the Marvel section that I wouldn't want to be the background noise to my root canal today. Do you want to take a stab at one of those? You have a pretty good chance of guessing what one of those would be, Sejohn.
If you wanted it, probably Secret Wars, right? You probably don't have any interest in that going on while you're doing this.
Honestly, I liked Secret Wars a lot. I think I'd be okay with that going on in the background. But you're in the right style. Basically, any movie I'd be all right with. But the TV shows, there are some that I haven't seen. And I was a little nervous that they were going to put on the new Daredevil. And I'm like, I don't want the new Daredevil on, because I haven't even watched the old Daredevil, let alone any of the things between here and there. So, man. I'm there. And then she settles on Thor. She picks Thor. Now, I don't have my glasses on. I'm about to have work done. So I'm a little nervous that she picked Thor the Dark World, which, as much as I enjoy Thor the Dark World, I can't think of a more depressing situation to be listening to Thor the Dark World than while getting a root canal done. I just can't. I can't think of one. But it's regular Thor, and I'm like, oh, okay, good. And then the dentist comes in, and the dentist, I'm sure I've mentioned it on the show before, we went to high school together. Like, he is one of the only people that I regularly see from high school is my dentist. And it's nice. It's always a good thing. Like, we got along fine when we were in school together, so it's not like some contentious thing. But he comes in, and he says to the assistant, really? Thor? Again? And I'm just like, oh, this is a thing that's happened before. And her response was, you know what? I'm paralyzed by choice. So Thor is the easiest solution whenever that happens. So there I am. They inject me with the Novocaine to numb my mouth. They start doing the work and everything. And Thor is perfect background noise. I have to say, for me, I love Thor. I think Thor is a great movie. So I'm okay with it being on in the background. But then while he's doing the actual drilling and shaping and pulling of the roots, he starts, for lack of a better word, mansplaining the movie that is on to his assistant. And I gotta tell you, that was a moment. So he's Thor, and Loki's in his adopted brother, and he gets the hammer because he's worthy, but then he acted unworthy because of this attack. He's just going on about stuff that's happened maybe 20 minutes ago. And then he's talking about, you know who else is gonna get to wield the hammer in these movies? And she's like, I don't know, Loki? And he's like, no, not Loki. He was so offended. There's I'm having a fanboy fight while I'm getting a root canal done as my, dinner theater. And he's like, no, think of somebody who's, who would be worthy, somebody noble and worthy. And meanwhile, going through my head, I'm like, well, I mean, Vision holds it. I think you're looking for Captain America, but Jane Foster, which is more relevant as we're watching Thor. Also, spoilers if you haven't seen these Marvel movies that we're spoiling right now. He's like, no, think. She's like, oh, I know, Captain America. And he goes, yeah, that's right, because he's worthy, and you have to be worthy. And he's describing this whole thing, and then I can't help it. My hand just kind of does the rock, you kind of have to be worthy, right? Because Deadpool can pick up the hammer, because lo and behold, the secret of Mjolnir is the fact that the wielder has to believe that they're worthy.
It's basically a no shame thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those situations where, if I pick up this hammer, I'm fine, because I think I could pick up the hammer because I feel like I would be worthy enough.
But that also explains why some people have been able to pick it up in the past, like Thanos has picked it up at one point, didn't he?
Yeah, Thanos definitely picked it up because he had noble intention, right?
Right.
I mean, that whole once Deadpool picked it up, and Gwenpool has picked it up also because, I know the whole steez of the hammer is how she described it. It kind of cheapened that whole worthiness thing, but then they've done a nice job, explaining that what Mjolnir can actually detect is, even if on a subconscious level you have doubts about your worthiness. So Thor, after his father tells him you're not worthy to wield this, it's kind of hard to get over a father saying that to you. So like that's
Right.
why he has to go through such a hero's journey in order to feel worthy again. And it's an interesting thing. And there's a reason why Loki can't pick it up, because like you were never meant to be the king of Asgard. You know, a father figure saying that regardless of it. Though I do believe now Loki could probably pick it up now that he doesn't give a fuck what Odin thinks. But, you know, it's all about your self-imposed sort of issues that Mjolnir detects, and like, maybe I don't want you to pick me up. Mjolnir essentially a dog. So the whole thing happens where they're having this discussion about it, and like afterwards it finishes and it went flying by. My root canal flew by. I mean, it took 90 minutes, but it did not feel like 90 minutes had passed. And I'm like, I really gotta say, it was kind of interesting, but also kind of weird. You guys having that like argument about Thor, like him basically explaining the plot while it was on. And she goes, he does it every time. It's his method. And that was like that like reveal, like we pulled the curtain aside and it's like, oh, okay. I'm like, well, if that's the case, then I'm glad that he has a way to focus his mind while he's doing the root canals. And I'm kind of happy it's Thor that does it. Like that whole thing was their dance. That really Thor again, like, yeah, but that's because, I mean, I don't know about you, but like sometimes when I'm doing a task that requires like hyper focus, I have something stupid that distracts the part of my brain that would distract me from being hyper focused. And that's what felt like happened in the chair at the dentist's office this past week.
No, I am definitely the kind of person that needs to work with something going on, but I have definitely fallen into the lo-fi camp over the last decade. The growth of the lo-fi indie market has been really good to me. But yeah, no, I'll definitely throw some music on and stuff like that while I have to work. And so like I get that aspect of it. It is interesting to me that being an asshole is part of his method.
It was weird. Like, it was more, I'm really enthusiastic about this thing and want to tell you about it than just outright being an asshole. Cause you're right. The way that I described it, very easily, this guy's an asshole. I recently had the blinders removed about the character of Peter Venkman in Ghostbusters. And saw like, wow, you're just as fucking grody and gross as kind of what Lewis is doing. Right? Like, I feel kind of sad now that I had those blinders removed from me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I mean that's the trick with a bunch of Murray's old characters, though, is that like you really look at it and it's just like, oh, you're just an asshole, and somehow people just fall for it. It's basically the whole joke with his characters of the late '80s, early '90s.
You're the asshole, but you're also the main character, so you get away with it.
Right.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing. So, but like that type thing. So, like, I wouldn't say that he didn't like say, it was more like the enthusiasm, like kind of the enthusiasm of a child to tell their parent about something. It's just that the parent in this situation happened to be his similar in age assistant, assisting on my root canal. But like, I kind of dug that she's like, yeah, no, I'm in on it. Like, it's the whole thing that he has to do. And I'm like, like, I don't love that for you. I'm sorry that that's what happens every time. But also, I'm really glad he didn't cut my tongue off with his drill. So...
This is so, if this is what it took.
You know, any port in a storm. But what the things that it made me question, like, if Donald Blake's job was actually just a dentist. They still call themselves doctors, even though it's a DDS, not an MD. And I'm like, is that it? It's not. He's an actual doctor. So it's not some sort of weird kinship he feels with the only dentist in Marvel Comics. But then the other thing that I have to note, and this is weird to say, right? But we just talked about a couple of weeks ago, Captain America: Brave New World. A couple of weeks ago, it was a month ago, right? It came out about a month ago?
Yeah.
Was the fact that, like, Phase 4 and Phase 5 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe are missing the magic that I was reminded of watching Thor. Like, there was something magical going on. Even, like, Thor's only the 4th movie in the MCU, right? Like, it was Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, and then Thor. Right? Am I remembering that correctly, Sejohn?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember when Incredible Hulk came into the whole
Incredible
thing.
Hulk is the same year as Iron Man.
Yeah.
Like it's two
So
months after Iron Man, they released the Incredible Hulk with Ed Norton as the Hulk, and then
yeah, I
Iron
think Captain
Man.
America and then Thor and then Iron Man 2, right?
No, Iron Man 2, then Thor, then Captain America. Captain America being the one that happens right before the Avengers. Yeah, like that's a heck of a thing. Because I'm with you in terms of, I'm thinking like, Thor is supposedly happening at the same time in world chronology as Iron Man 2 and Incredible Hulk. So it's easy to
Right.
get those messed up. And then conversations that are happening with like Coulson and Thor, I'm like, does that track with everything else that's going on? The one that really did it is the Selvig conversation where he's like, I knew this doctor, he was the head of his field in Gamma, and then they just disappeared him. And I'm like, oh my God, when did that happen to Banner? And I'm like, oh, he's talking about when he became the Incredible Hulk. It doesn't matter that like right now in the country at the same time, S.H.I.E.L.D. is hunting down the Incredible Hulk. Like he knew him beforehand.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so like even by the fourth movie, there was a magic, and you can kind of feel that magic. I would venture go back to any phase 1, 2, or 3 Marvel film, and you kind of feel that magic, that like something special is happening. Not necessarily important, but something special. And I could feel that specialness while watching Thor and just listening to Thor in the background. They had a clear goal in the Avengers. Like you can tell that. And then they had a clear goal of getting to the Infinity Gauntlet comic book story as best that they could. Right? Like Avengers 2
Right.
kind of just feels like a part of that path. It doesn't feel like a culmination of the second phase. And even then, the culmination of the second phase would probably be Civil War, because it opens up the world a lot and it breaks down the Avengers. I mean, if you look at the first phase of Marvel as a trilogy, right? The first one, everything comes together in the end, and now, oh, we're all together. Your second part of most trilogies sort of end with a defeat in some way.
Yeah, well, and
Before-
and that is what happens in Ultron. Like, let's not forget, like that what happens. The events of Ultron are not good for the Avengers. That
No,
is,
no, they are
are
not.
seen as they are seen as aggressors in that story, and they are seen as like failing at the end of that story.
Yeah, which is what leads to the Sokovia Accords. But I think that seeing the consequences in the same like story, like that being the down ending, and then them breaking apart, like being
Yes.
divided, going into Act 3, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah,
But it was just interesting to like be reminded. Like I get where people are coming from when they're like Marvel movies aren't the same. I don't love how down on Brave New World everybody was. Especially because of the whole, you had to do a lot of homework to understand that movie. And even Disney Plus this week said, before watching Captain America Brave New World, we strongly encourage you take the time to watch Falcon and Winter Soldier. Like that was a marketing thing that they put up on the thing today on this
Interesting.
week.
Yeah.
Where again, I think Incredible Hulk is also important viewing, but that's just
yes,
me. Like,
but Incredible Hulk famously not a recently produced thing
Right.
by Disney Marvel, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's on Disney Plus. I was surprised to see it on Disney Plus. There was that little bit of me that hoped that that's what she was going to put on, was the Incredible Hulk, because I love that movie and it's been too long. But it was. I could feel that magic in those original Marvel Cinematic Universe offerings, having Thor on in the background. And it was kind of nice to be reminded.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I am not happy that everybody's like, no, I didn't like Captain America Brave New World. You need to know too much in order to enjoy it. But then also, Sejohn, beautiful segue here, I'm not happy with how down on Powerpuff everybody was.
Yeah.
Like I watched the trailer and I'm like, man, I would have eaten this show up. This is my type of entertainment. And then over the past week, I've like watched people discussing it, and everybody was like disgusted by it. Mojo Jojo, is it a monkey? We don't know. We saw one episode. Maybe he comes back. Maybe he clones his dad and now he's a monkey with the brain.
Right.
Like there's a million ways that they could do it. And it really is just in the camp of adaptation that Riverdale made such like nutrient rich soil for the CW. Why wouldn't they do it? A lot of people are upset that that cartoon that whitewashed us. That cartoon is the reason of my show. Like, shut up, right? They're just having fun. I was not prepared for the wave of anger that inspired. Because I was not angry about it. I was inspired myself.
Well, it's that thing though that we talk about a lot where people didn't get there was a lot of assumptions built up about what that show was going to be because it never came to fruition. We never get to see any of that stuff bear out, right? So it's the same vein as people getting shitty about movies announced for 5 years from now. We were just talking about Marvel and every time they talk about any plan going forward, I think part of the reason they've had such a hard time committing to one is because anytime they mention any hint of a plan going forward, people just fucking barrel on how it's a terrible idea and they get scared off from doing it, right? They don't have they don't have the I don't know, the stupidity or the courage to do what they did with the Avengers, which was when they announced it, people were like, that's ambitious, but they still went forward with it, right? And they're not doing that this time around with Marvel, and a lot of it is because of what you're talking about going on here with the fan base stuff, is that it's so hard to do anything nowadays and get a good gauge from how it's going to do because people just fucking just shit on everything until it's out, and then if you're lucky, if it's good enough, it rises above that bullshit. But otherwise, everything's just kind of lost in the muck and the mire now.
Yeah, and it's kind of disappointing. I want to say it's a zero fucks given attitude is what happened about it, but it's not. The same sort of bean counters and projections that had them say we can do an Avengers film in 6 movies. Our 6th movie can be the Avengers. Is the same stuff that now says, ooh, I don't know if it's viable for us to do another film in the Captain America universe, in the Ant-Man universe, in the Thor universe. We're probably never going to see Captain Marvel again. All of those things. And it's because they were it's hyper profitable. Look at how much money these movies are making. Of course, we're going to have to spend some money to put all these big name stars in Avengers, but it'll be worth it. It'll pay off. And now those same people are there's no financial gain to be had if we continue along this path.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing, is that it's all about the money. It's not about the art or anything like that. It's about where's the money that we can make on this.
Yeah, right. Well, because if they were smart and they focused on the art in any modicum, they wouldn't be in the situation that they're in. If they spent any time actually giving a shit about making the movie well, as opposed to making the movie in a way that will make them the most money, right? Then we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in right now with them. That's exactly the issue.
Yeah. And that's, I don't know, it's sad. It's really sad. But it's a nice jumping off point to something that we said we were going to talk about this week. Sejohn, the floor is yours.
Well, wait a minute. Don't you have something that you need to do, or do you want me to go first?
Oh, what do I have to do?
You haven't done your Suits LA.
No, we're saving that for a little bit later this time. We're not going to do it
we'll see.
Where it's always going to be peppered in at different points.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Keeping people on their toes. It's the only reason they come back,
I know.
I watched Flow this week just to kind of get myself caught up to speed, because I had mentioned last week that I had done Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul, to give the full title, which was an Oscar-nominated movie, but did not win because it lost to Flow. And so I wanted to make sure that I had seen Flow this week so that I could properly talk about it. The whole kind of state of animation at the moment, because there's just some wild stuff that's going on. First of all, how much do you know about Flow as a movie in general?
I watched it this morning. The only thing I knew about it, and where I was a little bit hinky as if we should talk about it, was there was some controversy about the fact that it was made in Blender. Controversy I found that has been proven false, or at least is not being talked about anymore. in that AI was a part of it through its use in Blender.
Blender, yeah, but Blender, that's a hard kind of thing to tackle because it's basically so Blender is a free animation program and it's not necessarily AI based, right? There's the more what it is that when you're making an animated movie nowadays, right? And you're using computers, not everybody does, but the majority of films, even when they're 2D, use computer animation now. You create skeletons of characters and there are programmable actions that those skeletons can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
What Blender has done, what Blender has given a lot of people access to that not everybody has had access to in the past is to libraries of those kinds of animations. Essentially meaning that a lot of the heavy lifting has been taken out of if you want to put together animations of any kind, which is on the one hand awesome because it gives more people access to the ability to create things, right, with these tools. But on the other, you start to have that conversation, much like you do with AI, where you get to the point of at what point is somebody taking all of the work out of your hands, and at what point do you no longer get to claim this, right? Now, where I fall in the whole Blender of it all is that people are doing phenomenal, wonderful things with Blender, as we're about to talk about with Flow. I think there's some phenomenal work being done there. But you're right. We'd be remiss to not point out that it did have some odd like reactions to it in the ways in which it was using this program. But I think that the reason that controversy has kind of died down, Dev, as you've mentioned, because it has definitely, is that it's a really it's a really hard conversation to point to like and say like, hey, you don't get to use this free thing that's available, meaning that then we can only make art made by somebody that can afford to make art. That doesn't seem
and
fair.
and money has always kind of felt like the barrier to entry in creating art. I mean, I know that you can
Especially
create
animated movies.
art for nothing, from like have nothing and create, but the people who are successful, the people you hear about, money isn't really an object for them.
Yeah.
Like that tends to be that's right. It's
Right.
gatekeeping again. And it seems like
Yeah,
that might have
it
been
becomes that.
what the issue was with the whole Blender of it all with Flow, is the fact that, and people saying, oh, well, art is dead because now you can just use Blender and win the Academy Award for animation. Like, those were things that I had seen, and I'm like, well, I'm still going to watch this movie. And I thank you for giving me a reason to, like, lighting a fire under my ass, because I watched it this morning, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah, so it's this gorgeous film that is. I'm going to warn people up front because I think this is something that I didn't know anything going in, and I'm the perfect kind of audience for that. So like I enjoyed finding this out kind of in the moment, but not everybody will. There's no dialogue. It is a completely sound effect based film, I guess is the best way to put it. There's some really really good work done in that regard in terms of animal noises and sound design and stuff like that. Because it's made in Blender, which again, I'm not sure has AI. There may be some AI elements to it now because everything has AI in it. So I'm not going to sit here and say that Blender doesn't use AI, but the idea that Blender is only AI is not true. That's not really what Blender is about. But this idea that because it's made in Blender, there is some really kind of noticeably harsh differences between certain types of animation. Some of it looking extremely cheap, some of it then looking gorgeous. Specifically, water effects and lighting effects in this movie were phenomenal, right? And so
not to like rush you off, but like timing out right there. I ever since Flushed Away, and I hate that I mean Aardman gonna be the patron saint of this whole bit talking about Flow apparently, but ever since Flushed Away, where they're like, we can't do what we usually do with clay because of the water, so we've had to develop an entire way to animate that looks like we're doing it stop motion by hand with clay because of the water. Water has become a huge metric for how I judge animation. And the water effects alone in Flow, I'm like, well, that's why it won the Academy Award for Best Animated Film.
Yeah. For
like
for a movie that is all about right, the idea of the movie is it's all about animals surviving during a flood. I won't
Yep.
say much more than that because honestly, there's not much more to the story than that. There's a lot of other things that happen, and there's a beautiful kind of journey that these animals go on, and it explores some like weird metaphysical stuff and things like that too. But the end of the day is like it is about these animals surviving a flood, and so the water effects become kind of a key feature to the whole thing. Yeah, but again, the lighting also, right? Like because the
Hmm.
light reflecting off of the water and the ways in which specifically there is that moment where they're going through like the old village that I couldn't tell if it was like it was probably a village that was meant to be up in the mountains, but because of the flood, they were at ground level now,
Right.
sea level as it were. But the light reflecting off of the water onto all of the buildings as they were like going through that maze of old buildings was just like some of the most beautiful light work I've seen in an animated film ever. And yeah, so there's all sorts of stuff going on there. And like I get it. Like I understand. Like so to go back to the argument of it all, right? I think the reason that I was so kind of caught off guard is that Wallace and Gromit was such a delight and such a nostalgic delight, and we are just so all about that that I would have called it a shoe-in for a win because like it is beautifully done. There is some amazing little effects in it, and there's some really fun jokes and some really fun bits in it, and then like add to that it's a feature length Wallace and Gromit, which we've only ever had one of those before with Were Rabbit. Now now we're lucky enough to have another. Like there's it's not something that we get all the time is what I'm saying is like Wallace and Gromit are not something that we see sequel upon sequels of in the world, but it is something that I think a lot of people are still aware of, which is really cool. So it's an interesting thing to have an IP that everybody's really familiar with, but not have so much source material to exploit, right?
Yeah,
So that
exactly.
there's not books on every shelf, there's not comics coming into our face, there's not video games being made. Well, I say that, but there was a video Wallace and Gromit video game. That was a quite a fun one actually. But there's definitely something to be said about an IP that is held back. Like, I don't know if it's purposefully held back. I'm sure that they wish that they could be doing more with these characters in the world, but like by the very nature of stop motion and the history of Wallace and Gromit, it has just been a very slow burn for that career, right? So just all of that's to say that like all of this would have said to me shoe in for the win. If not then seeing Flo and just seeing like, okay, because Flo is doing something new. And and I don't know if I still would have beforehand told you that that means it would have won, but I definitely would have had an argument for I hope Flo wins, right? And so, in a weird way, I've been very delighted to kind of find this that the nostalgic like romp that I would have thought would have been the perfect movie to snag an Academy Award, a nice cozy win for everybody of the night, actually didn't and lost to this like innovative little project that like had some controversy around the ways that it was made because it happened to be made in a way that gives more access to artists as opposed to like as opposed to everything that we would have seen in Wallace and Gromit, which is like taken years and years and years, if not decades, of building up like good faith and like and money and success to be able to convince somebody to let you make a claymation film like that is like that's not an easy task to do.
Yeah. It really is. Yeah, you bring up a good point. I haven't gotten to see Vengeance Most Foul yet. I'm a little upset about that. I will admit it. But yeah, like I agree. I honestly am watching Flow before the water effects happen because the water effects, like it was legitimately a moment where I'm like, is this just real water? Are they just using like real water with this? And then I'm like, no, it's animated. But then the fact that I had to stop and question the validity and the reality of the water that was in use really like, okay, so they've sold me on this. But
Yeah.
up to the point of the flood, uh, I'm like, I'm a little surprised that this won best animated feature because there's a lot of texture differences and texture
Yeah.
issues and like what is it when like you see it in video games and stuff where like stuff bleeds through, there's a term for it and I can't think of what that term is.
Anti-aliasing
Yeah,
or what are we talking about?
anti-aliasing. Like there are moments of anti-aliasing and I'm just like, ooh, this is weird. And I can also understand wanting to award the creativity and the innovation, right? That being a reason why you vote for this film if you're a member of the Academy. And then the water effects came and I'm like, yeah, everything else is forgiven because I know how difficult this is. I have voted for shorts like animated short films for Academy Awards, like, and not like for the Academy for them to win, but you know, in like little Oscar pools with people, we would all see them and then cast our votes, and then that's what we would be rooting for. Like that's a fun thing we used to do back when it was fun to go out to the theaters and watch the like shorts packages. It's not as fun as it used to be, I'll be honest with you. Where if there was water involved in the animation, there was one that was all mixed media, and like halfway through they filled the scene with water, and it was real water. And I'm like, oh my God, that's incredible. That has to win. Because like, you know how hard it is to do everything they're doing while like the element of water is present.
Right.
It really is, like, it really is something that impresses me, and it's beautiful when it's here. And again, maybe it's because I'm watching on like a 4K monitor, so I'm noticing like the color differences and the things like that, or when there's texture problems. But all of that was forgotten once the water happened, and I'm like, this, like, I'm into this. This has really captured my attention and imagination.
Yeah, no, it really has, which is why I think also another reason why that argument about all of the Blender stuff really kind of fell away is because like you also can't deny while watching it that there is something really beautiful going on, right? And so you know, there's definitely going to be more talk about the use of these kinds of animations going forward and AI. I mean, I'm sure that there's going to be all sorts. I mean, you and I both only just found out, although apparently this has been known since January, pre-Oscars, that there was AI used in The Brutalist, and then come and find out The Brutalist goes and wins like Best Actor for Adrian Brody. Meanwhile, his accent in the film was AI enhanced, and it's just like, hey man, you had one job. You had one job to do, and you didn't do that. And apparently his attitude about the whole thing is just like, I don't know, it didn't take work away from anybody. And it's like, well, it did. It took work away from an actor that could actually do the accent and gave it to you instead.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. And that's why, like, once you sent me the Brutalist thing, that the Brutalist had used AI, I'm like, well, it doesn't matter if Flo used AI, because, like, also, what do you mean by AI in an animated thing? Arguably, like, the render process could be considered artificial intelligence coming in and stitching it over.
Well, and the problem with that is that we've all been so loosely using the term AI now for the last 5 or 6 years that it's kind of started to be a little squishy in its meaning, because there's a lot of stuff that we call AI that we really shouldn't. And I mean, like, I'll admit that I am guilty of this, that like I just use the phrase for shorthand as well, because that's the colloquialism right now, like, right, like is to just call it AI. But it's actually becoming kind of detrimental, because there's people out there that are doing things like digital art, and they're being accused of using AI because people are learning digital art equals AI, and that's not true. Like there's digital art. AI is not digital art does not automatically mean the implementation of artificial intelligence to make it. That's just not how it works. But I do think that this Blender conversation is an interesting kind of version of that. Is people just automatically hear, oh, you used this free computer program to make your movie, you must have it must cheapen the experience somehow. And it's just like, no, like in fact, actually, this is what was great about this stuff being accessible, is like somebody got to make this movie that they otherwise probably never would have gotten to make, right? And it's the same, it's the same thing when I think about back in the day when video cameras became popular and people started to get really weird about like people making movies in their own, on their own, and like independent cinema getting kind of the shit end of the stick for a while because it wasn't real like movie making. And it's like that we've gotten past that. So I hope we get past this.
Well, I certainly think that these Academy Awards, if I wanted to put on my tinfoil hat and say that they were pushing an agenda, that they were trying to normalize and make okay the use of AI in the creation of the art that they're going to celebrate. Specifically with The Brutalist. Through that whole thing and Adrian Brody and the way that it's been treated. But then also something like this film, which again, it's Blender. There's no proof of any AI, but there were definitely claims that it used AI to win. And what does that mean for animation going forward? Which is scary. But, in some people's eyes, seeing it and seeing that it was made with a free computer program, like it normalizes it. And that is the scarier thing about AI and the 2025 Academy Awards.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'd
After
like to talk
everything
about.
that happened with we had a fucking strike over the use of AI in art, and
A
it
year
went so
later.
poorly
Yeah.
that
How quickly we forgot only a year had passed before suddenly the best actor, not like winner, had AI used to augment his performance.
and that is confirmed. That's not
That's a
even us being
confirmed
like
thing. Yeah.
speculative about
You
that. That is a
send that to me and
confirmed
I
thing.
look, this show used to do whole episodes dedicated to the Academy Awards. I have never been happier that we have moved away from it than like this year. Like they were
Yeah.
coming up and I'm like, I don't really care about any of these movies. And I mean, I feel like maybe on some level that makes me a bad cinephile, but at the other side of it, it's like, first of all, the fact that you can't see some of the films in cinema before the Academy Awards, like they only have value after they've won the award, is really weird to me. Honora didn't play anywhere near me that I was aware of, but it was playing at the theater this week. Like,
Yeah, now that it won, right?
yeah, so I don't love it. It's just become a lot. But then reading that article where it's like, oh yeah, no, we used AI to make him sound more Hungarian. Well, you have a problem with that? Yeah, in fact, your whole industry had a problem with it. You went on strike for more than 100 days about it. But sure.
Yeah.
It was weird. So let's end this on a happy note, though, and give thanks once again to the patron saint Ardman. It's also insane to me that 10 years ago, a non-verbal animated film from Ardman, Shaun the Sheep, caught such fucking flack for there being no vocals in that at all. No speech.
Yeah, there was no dialogue, right?
Yeah. So for that 10 years later, that is done in a movie and it receives accolades for it. Like, it's such a weird world that we live in, Siege.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's all at the whims of audiences everywhere, and people are fickle.
Yeah.
So, like, that's the important thing to remember about all of this. I mean, like, in the grand scheme of things, in the larger picture, right, it explains a lot about what's going on in this country right now. Is that everything is just built to please the audience, and the audience is a fickle beast. So, like, we've completely switched our attitudes on a lot of things, sometimes regressively, sometimes progressively, and like, it's going to continue to be that way. Now, this is not me being like nihilistic or defeatist in any way, and being like it's not worth fighting the good fight because it's all going to change anyway. It's why you fight the good fight, so that you can try and dictate where the next change is going to go, at the very least guide it, right? So, like, keep up the good work out there, everybody, but, like, also keep in mind that you are one human in a grand world of things that are going to keep changing around you without your say.
Yeah. That's well done. And then the other thing that I want to talk about is I'm tired of stories about things being too scary for children. Like,
Oh,
I
he's talking
sent,
about that article that you found about
yeah,
that guy that had to, God forbid, explain the movie to his kids because he had to talk to them about what they were watching. They had to engage with art in conversation and not just, like, consume it.
yeah. And the flood scene, the kids were afraid that the animals were going to die. Hey, congratulations, children. That's how you're supposed to feel in that moment. You're
I'm glad
supposed
you
to
have
think,
empathy. You're not psychopaths.
yeah, right? Good job. You are supposed to be fearful that the animals could die at the force of nature that is water. It just reminded me, I was just talking to somebody about it. Hold on to your hat, the Boo Fest with Curious George, and the whole like, oh, it's too scary for my 5-year-old. Yeah, but in not letting your 5-year-old see the end of it, it became a whole lot scarier. Right? Like, you need to have them push
That's
through
the one
your
about
kid.
something is stealing the hats, and then it turns out to just be the thing in the tree, right?
It's a squirrel. Yeah, it's a squirrel
The
that's
squirrel in
stealing
the
the
tree. Yeah,
hats.
yeah.
So, like, oh, it's scary, and, like, yeah, maybe some iconography that's a little frightening, but at the end of the day, what you learn in Boo Fest is that there's an explanation for things in the world that scare you. The scarier thing is not knowing what's going on. And your
Yeah.
mind can, your imagination can take hold and make something that's mundane, like it's a squirrel who's taking the hats, scarier if you don't seek out an explanation for what frightens you in the world. Ditto,
Yeah.
imagine your kids are scared at the flood scene in Flow. They do finish the movie in that article, right? But your kids are scared of the flood. All right, maybe we stop it, right? Then the kids think, oh my God, those animals did die. Otherwise, why would mom have stopped the movie? like it's one of those situations where
the idea that like you had to teach your kids media literacy, like you had to sit with them and like spend time with them to break down like events that were happening and process their feelings about this stuff in this film, and like talking about that like it was a burden was just wild to me, because it's just like, what then? Maybe you shouldn't be showing your children movies at all, but like, I don't do that. Like, definitely don't do that. But if you don't feel like you can accurately talk about this stuff with them, don't engage them with it then, because then it's just gonna be detrimental.
Yeah, the weirdest one was just like, and it felt like we were messing with the flow of the film because we had to keep stopping and starting it. And it's like, well, because you were. Like, you legitimately were pausing the film in order to have these discussions with your children. If they're losing interest or things like that, just soldier on through the movie and then have the discussion afterwards. Like, if you feel like that's also to the detriment of the film, you're in control of the pause button. Maybe don't pause it every time you think your kid doesn't understand what's going on.
Yeah. I will say that is the only real article of that I have come across. I do think there is definitely a discussion to be had with parents about whether or not this is a film that they feel like they want to engage with for various reasons. I mean, there are people in my life that are our age that I was straight up just like, I don't think you're going to like this movie because it's like basically cute animals in peril for an hour and a half. So I'm not saying watch it, but you should know that Flow is like a total like banger of a film. And like, you know, I have those conversations with people. So like, if you're a parent of a child that like has some real issues with that, obviously you need to know like this is the stuff that goes on, and you take that into account. But at the end of the day, like, the majority of people out there that are watching this movie with their kids, I do think there is going to be some stuff you have to talk about with them or look at with them, because like there is some weird things about it. Hey, they don't talk in this movie. Like, that alone would be wild to me if I was 5 years old. You know, like, oh, we watched an hour and a half movie and there was no talking. But also there's just some stuff that happens that is weird and artsy, right? Like, there's an entire, like I said, it gets a little metaphysical for a couple of moments of like, hey, what just happened to this character that floated up into the nebula of space? Like, what is going on there? Like I think there's just something to be said. But it's the same kind of conversations I had with my parents when I was a kid, and we watched like Dumbo, and I was like, what's up with the pink elephant scene? And my parents had to explain to me like, oh, that's what being drunk is. Like, that kind of thing. And I was like, okay, well, that was scary, but now that you've explained it to me, it's no longer scary.
Right. Like, that's the thing. Like, I used to be afraid of fire in movies because I was afraid of fire in life. And like, exposure therapy is what got me over that. Like, oh, okay, like, fire's fucking scary. Like, that's a healthy fear to have. I'm looking at the lighter on my desk, and like, I've also mastered my fear of fire in the real world. But like, not being able to watch it in movies because of how fearful I was that fire would come and take our home away. Like, that's a real thing that I can admit. But I got over it, and I got over it before I was like double digits. Like, it was a fear I had when I was 3 or 4, and by the time I was 5, I could watch Robin Hood again. I could watch The Jungle Book. Like, but it was like very young, and a discussion had to happen. Like, you know, like, is fires in the movie? The movie's not real. Like, yeah, I know, and I understand that it's not real, but being able to engage
that stuff then teaches you more about it, and the more you learn, the less scared you are.
Yeah,
like it's just really funny to me reading that article, and again, it feels like it's a one-off, but like reading that article and listening to somebody complain about having to actually like engage with the film in more than just watching it. And then and being like, my kids all they wanted to do was like ask questions and stuff, and it's just like, that's good. This is all good stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why this is being written as if this is like some knock against the movie.
Yeah. Oh God, my children want to talk to me about that movie we just watched. Ugh. Like, that would excite me if I had a child and they're like, can we talk about that movie? Yes, please, let us talk about that film. But again, like that's what we do on the show. That's something that I love to do. I guess that's not something that writer likes to do. Like, I want my kids to just be distracted for an hour and a half and then no thoughts about it afterward.
Yeah. It's wild.
That's why I sent it over. Is that like, this is something that this film inspired, and I'm really surprised by it. But also, one of my happiest memories with you was after we recorded a Three Friends and a movie. I think it was like Gremlins. I don't know. It was a Christmas one. We went to go see John Wick at the Dirt Theater in Rumford. And then we went to Greg's. God, so many local references. And sat in their tavern downstairs in just big chairs that like made it feel like we were in a like smoking salon or something like that. Like we were men of industry in the 1800s. And we talked about John Wick. And one of the saddest things that you said was, it really bothers me that there are people in my life who I can never not only recommend that film to, but experience that film with. Because the death of the dog in John Wick will be a bridge too far for them to cross. And so I get it. So watching Flow, and it is basically cute animals in peril for an hour and 25 minutes, I'm like, man, it kind of bothers me that, like, I hope that those people in Sejohn's life, he has found a way around it, and that he could experience something like this with them. Because no real peril comes to any of the animals, right? It's not John Wick where a puppy is murdered in the first half hour.
No. It's more that it is the just constant, just like, I mean, you know, it's a homeward bound. It's a puppy. Yeah, it's that puppy on a journey, like, feeling of like, oh no, you're watching this poor defenseless animal in the big scary world, and there's a lot of moments where it's scary. Like that's the biggest thing about it, is that there's just definitely some heavy stuff in that regard. And like, and that's the other thing about that article that we were talking about, is just like, also, I don't know if there's much in this movie that would happen that a kid not necessarily wouldn't understand, with just a couple of moments of just like, yeah, well, this is what's up. So like, also acting like you had to have these long drawn out conversations, like you just had to answer a question or two. You just had to like, the kid goes, did that guy die? And you just go, yes, or no, don't worry. And then that's it. And then you keep watching.
Right. And I can't imagine, like, there are moments where, like, you question if some animals have survived or not. Imagine answering in that moment, and then, like, lo and behold, that animal actually went the other way.
Yeah.
Like, I think the one that really bothered me, though, was, like, noticing my children were losing interest. So I thought, let's pause the movie for a second. Because, like, that, what better way to, like, lose interest in something than by breaking up the immersion with it?
Yeah, I don't understand that move. Man, this movie was so engaging that even my dog was like hardcore watching it. I think the sound effects were really getting to them, but like, one of them was just sitting there like invested in watching this cat this entire time. It was very funny.
I ended up having to turn it up.
Engaged.
I like, you know, like, I watched it at my little station where I have it, and then like more sound started happening in the house. So I hit the turn up, and I did not know. I watched it on Max. It's available on Max right now. HBO Max. I still like to call it that. And I didn't know that when I adjusted the volume on my computer that it would bring up the timeline. And the timeline's like, you have 4 minutes left. And I'm like, really? How did that happen so quickly?
Yeah.
Like, it did. It flew by. So, I mean, I definitely thank you, Sejohn, for giving me an excuse and a reason to watch Flow. I recommend it. So yeah, and I think it sounds like you're doing the same. So
yeah,
excellent.
100%, man.
Cool. So I think it's about that time.
You ready?
Recap of Suits LA. If it gets canceled, that's all we'll say. But if it gets renewed, we're gonna keep on doing it. It Suits LA on the Say Report. Maybe, I don't know. I forgot the lyrics that time, so definitely not better than the last two. So I need to start out. I haven't put 60 minutes on the clock. I'm an idiot. It's right there. 16 started. I have to start this recap with something that happened at work with one of my coworkers. And the fact that I said, was that?
Good use of time.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Well, it was important because she's like, oh, I saw the second episode. I'm like, yeah, it kind of sucked, right? And she's like, no, it didn't suck. I really liked the part at the end where his brother held Stuart's hand. And I'm like, that's the third episode. She's like, no, it's the second. And I'm like, no, this is the second. She's like, yeah, I saw that. She forgot the second episode happened. So I felt like I was a little harsh on the second episode. There was going to be a bit of an apology for that, especially after my feelings about the third episode. But when somebody else who's watching the show straight forgets an episode happens, straight forgets 44 minutes of their lives that they gave to entertainment, it feels justified in some way. That said, that aside, because we're looking at this as what was meant to be a streaming show, then not very reformatted, but just reclassified as a week-to-week broadcast show, it does lend some credibility to my belief that second episode was only the way that it was because they imagined you could go right into the third episode. Here's the other thing that I'm going to say about Suits LA after 3 episodes. There's a reason why criminal defense trials in things like Law and Order or, Ally McBeal, The Practice, what's the one with William Shatner? Boston Legal.
Boston Legal.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a reason why those cases tend to be 1 episode and done. I love Kevin Weissman. I do. I'm a big fan. I'm very happy I'm seeing him on my television again. We had a brief little Twitter interaction. It was very exciting. That being said, I'm fucking tired of this case. And the fact that it might be the whole 13 episodes of Suits LA is I'm exhausted, Sejohn. I have to say, I'm tired of Lester Thomas case. Because in a regular TV show, we would have, here's the case and it's done. Tying an entire arc around being the defense attorney of a television show. Even look at movies, right? A Few Good Men, one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite film, right? It's 2.5 hours long, but in 2.5 hours, you're done with the trial of Dawson and Downey, right? It's already done. We've already dedicated more time in these 3 episodes of Suits LA to this case than most films would dedicate to a defense case.
Right.
And it's a lot. It's really, Law and Order, Law and Order, come to find out, this is how they define it, is a show that is a 2-part show. The first half is the police doing the law, catching the person, and then the second half is the trial. And most people that I know care more for the front part as opposed to the rear part.
Well, that's why all of the spinoffs are so much more focused on
the law,
investigators,
not the order.
Right. Like Criminal Intent, it's basically all about the investigations.
Right.
SVU.
Yeah, Special Victims Unit. I don't think we rarely see the inside of a courtroom. And it's why Law and Order got canceled, right? And they brought it back because they needed something. And Dick Wolf's their freaking golden goose with the Chicagos and with the FBI's for CBS. Though 2 of the FBI's just got cancellation notices, so who knows? But yeah, so they... there's a whole thing. So Suits LA tying so much of its story to we've seen the inside of a courtroom one time for him to say that he's not guilty. I'm ready for it to be done. And I hope that they're smart enough to not try to keep the case going the entire 13 episode runtime.
Well, especially because that's not what the show is about, right? I understand the show is about lawyers and about their clients, so in a way it's what the show is about. But it's not like American Crimes or whatever, right? The weird
American
Ryan Murphy
Crime
one where
yeah.
the focus is on the trial, right?
Yeah, right. And that's also sort of telling something that happened in real life, so you're getting the fictional accounts and the dramatization, and you know what the outcome is. We don't know what the outcome is going to be in this show, so it just feels like you're padding the story. And especially
Yeah.
because Ted Black is not a defense attorney. Like when they opened up Black Lane and Associates, like it was Ted Black was an entertainment lawyer, Stuart Lane was a defense attorney. So it's also Steve Amell's character is not doing his like what his specialization is. Right? And I guess that's kind of like Suits is like Mike's pretending to be a lawyer. So like Ted's kind of pretending to be a defense attorney after being a prosecutor. And it's strange. And the entertainment stuff is good. The third episode, they talked about Brian Baumgartner. They sold the episode on Brian Baumgartner, which like credit for that because Patton Oswalt also showed up and was awesome in his one scene of the show. And honestly, I think most people would have been like, this week Patton Oswalt guest stars on the new Suits LA. But Brian Baumgartner's whole thing, he's Kevin Malone from The Office, and he wants to kill Kevin Malone. He wants to become an Oscar-caliber dramatic actor. And Erica, as the new head of entertainment, has to take on... Basically, it reminded me of The West Wing and Big Cheese Day. Was there like Brian Baumgartner's in for his annual come in and ask for something insane and impossible, so you got to give it to him. Super Bowl tickets, meet the Pope, like clone his dog. Meet the Pope was not one of them, but clone his dog was. So it was like this interesting thing. And then what he ended up wanting to do is he wanted to meet with Tom Hanks because Tom Hanks is a comedic actor who was able to become an Oscar-worthy actor. And then my mother's like, well, who's he going to ask? Robin Williams? Robin Williams is dead, Brian Baumgartner. But then Tom Hanks, and I don't really ever think of Tom Hanks as a comedic actor, right? Because he was in Bosom Buddies, but then everything else he did after that was kind of like higher caliber acting.
I don't know, man. He did like Bachelor Party, and he did.
Well, I think about like I guess like
Dragnet. And he did.
Dragnet is a good example. Thank you for Dragnet. And I love Dragnet. But even like I think Splash, which is kind of a romantic comedy, high concept romantic comedy, his character Alan is like very serious and more of a dramatic, like it's his reaction to, he's the straight man in that. So I don't think about that. But then like Dragnet, yeah. Pep is definitely the comedy and Aykroyd is the straight man as Friday. So I guess it is that. And then I think, yeah, Bachelor Party, The Burbs. But even The Burbs has, like, sort of that dramatic tilt to it. You know?
Well,
like,
The Burbs works as a comedy because he is such a good dramatic actor.
Right.
Right? Like, that's kind of the trick to his comedies is that, like, he is really funny and the comedy is really good when it comes. It's, I mean, like, I fucking love Lady Killers, but, like, that's a whole other episode.
That's a whole other episode, too.
But like he's hilarious, but he's funny because of the fact that he brings a level of work and steez to the whole thing that like cannot be like denied, and it's what makes the bits land essentially. So like, but that is something that you have to earn, right? And he doesn't start there. Like I said, like he's got these movies that if you look at the front load of his career plus the TV show that he was on, like I mean, he has definitely come from comedy roots, but I think it's just that his career has been so long now that we just don't think of it that way.
You never really consider that, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's been 30 years since Life is Like a Box of Chocolates. Like, so forgive us for anything that came beforehand.
Well, I think Joe versus the Volcano might be the first time that you could really point to him really playing things straight, but it's still being a kind of lighter film.
Yeah, I suppose so. I don't know. That movie's dark as hell, but it's a dark comedy, right? It's in the same, it's hanging up its hat next to What About Bob, if we're going to like talk about similar films to that. Yeah, that's good. I don't know. I mean, I like Tom Hanks. I do. But like to think of it, like it was such a weird sort of like, I want to meet with Tom Hanks in order to do this. And Bosom Buddies and Kevin Malone in The Office, those are such different things. like it was just so weird. Also, there was a good line, Patton Oswalt, like the closest you'll get to an Oscar, its last name is Meyer. But I'm like, isn't Oscar another producer on The Office? Like he's already gotten close to an Oscar. But you're proud of yourselves. You could have this one. But yeah, and more about Erica. Like the second episode, there was that whole I don't know what makes good entertainment thing. And they had some good moments with that where she's like, I know who Carlton Banks is. I watched The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I'm a black lady. And then the response of like, well, yeah, but in my defense, you didn't know what Cheers was? That made me happy. As a fan of Cheers, but also like, that's a huge thing to have a blank spot in your mind of. Like, because it kind of went MASH to Cheers. That's how that happened.
Yeah. The zeitgeist, as it were.
The zeitgeist of like just popular must-see TV. Everybody was sitting and watching it, right? And
even if you weren't watching it, you were aware of it. That's the kind of show Cheers was,
it,
right?
So that was a good moment. And then also the whole, I know who Tom Hanks is, but then she doesn't recognize the quote from Forrest Gump. And then she's like, what's your favorite Tom Hanks movie? The one with the helicopter and the secret agent and the goldfish. Okay, so you've never seen a Tom Hanks movie? Because, is that any of his movies?
Helicopter could be Saving Private Ryan.
Could also be Dragnet, not to be that guy, but there's that nice
could be
moment
Dragnet.
at the end.
The Spy, right? What was the other
Bridge
one?
of
The
Spies?
Spy movie? That would be, Bridge of Spies, right?
Yeah, that's what my one. And then the goldfish.
I don't know. He wasn't in Fish Called Wanda, was he?
No,
Right?
he wasn't.
No.
He was in Splash. Another one I
Splash.
thought of, it could be something in Catch Me If You Can. Like, is he walking around with a goldfish, that character? It was just a good moment. Overall, the third episodes of Suits LA was stronger than the second. And the whole he knew thing, though, the fact that there's a picture that came up of Lester looking at his partner with his wife canoodling behind the curtain, but then it's revealed that he's holding his glasses and he's blind as a bat without his glasses. So even though there's photographic evidence that he may have saw them carrying on, he couldn't have because he didn't have his glasses on. That was a moment, I guess. Luckily, it's not like one of those shows where we saw explicitly what happened, so we know. There is still some mystery about what happened when his business partner died, and they're doing the work. Like, that's the thing. I will say for Suits LA, they're doing the nice job of showing us how boring and mundane law work actually is in the real world.
Yeah.
Because, you think of it as, I think of all the comedies, like sitcoms that do things like, man, Law and Order really ruined a whole generation of lawyers. Because it's not as flashy and fast as that, right? You can't, like, surprise evidence, because that breaks the rules of law. Discovery is a thing. So it definitely has to happen. And then the most heartbreaking thing, and honestly, I think this is where they're going to get a lot of their juice from this first season, is going back to 2010 and seeing the relationship between Stuart and Ted. The fact that Stuart was the only person he could trust to be the fake lawyer for the mafia guy who's turning over to state's evidence, so that the mob, will, and the fact that, like, I'm asking you to do this, but you're going to be a target of the mafia until everything is done. Like, that's a big deal. Talking about how expensive pastrami is in New York. This costs half my paycheck. Well, if you're trying to get into my pants, you might. And the fact that, Stewart asking Ted to be his best man, and if he doesn't agree, then he's not going to get married to Helen. Obviously, that's not what actually happens, but that's how he words it. He's like, oh, you're going to propose to Helen? Only if you'll agree to be my best man. Oh, I have a lot of power here, because if I don't agree to be your best man, what, you're not going to marry her? I didn't really think this through, did I? Like that was good, and seeing that whole thing. And then the discussion, he had a discussion with his father again, this time not laid up in bed, saying, like, I know you only offered me a job because a mafia boss paid you to. And the fact that, like, I have a friend who just offered to put his reputation on the line to protect me, and that man is more family to me than you'll ever be. So then the fact of how everything went down with Stuart, a man that he viewed as a brother, like, it's heavy stuff. Like, they're doing a good job with it. And the ghost of his dead brother came back, which I didn't think was going to happen. And they used it in a very, like, good way. Like, who's getting buried tomorrow? It's Dad. well, I want to go. And he's like, we're not going. He wasn't a good father to us. That doesn't matter. He's still our father. If there was no him, there'd be no you. Like, that's a heavy argument. Like, you can hate the guy, but doesn't change the fact that he means something to you in some way. I don't.
Yeah. I mean, there's no way to ever completely decouple yourself from this human being.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, you got to deal with it.
And then think about the fact that, like, the only two people at the burial were Stuart and Ted. Like, this is not a beloved man who had a bunch of people to watch him get buried. So, you know. And then the Brian Greenberg story, and that's something, because I don't know how that's all going to shake out with him being over at Stewart and Sam's new law firm. He's been given the head of entertainment. He's been given an office that reflects that. And then his first job, his gift as that, was to determine the 3 people on the entertainment roster who should be fired. But then that became a nothing in the terms of, I'll finish the statement though. But it became nothing in terms of, you're actually not firing those people. We just needed to know that you could do what needs to be done. I hate that type of shit. Can I be honest with you like that? That's like you got to kill your dog in Kingsman, but the gun's not loaded.
Yeah.
Like, fuck you.
Oh, yeah. No, it's bullshit.
It's
it's cheap.
Yeah, it's cheap. It's like, oh, it's a good way to bring dramatic tension into something and then completely have it removed and then feel like I got lied to.
Well, right. I mean, because you did.
Yeah, exactly. So that's Suits LA episode 3. I'm glad that we got to talk about it. I'm really enjoying recapping them. But I need something to happen in, like, modern time. A lot of it's good in the background, but what made Lost a show that we talked about incessantly was the fact that stuff was happening on the island and in the past. Like,
right.
So far, everything in Suits LA has been happening in the past. Like,
yeah, the dual timeline thing is it's a tough thing to keep up. I'll be interested to know how long the show sticks to that. If the show sticks around for longer than a season or 2, like, does it keep up with the whole back and forth? Sometimes they surprise you. Psych played with this a lot. It would basically, like, episodes would always open with them doing, like, something in the past that would kind of connect to then what the story would be for the larger episode. And I thought that was going to be something that would disappear after a while, but they kept that up the whole series.
Well, because I think it wasn't leaning on it for narrative exploration. Like, it was kind of just this cold open was him as a kid. They did it in a nice way. Like, it wasn't like something happened in modern times and then we saw how that was relevant to something that had happened before. So they
no, it was always like the lesson that they learned then is the same lesson that they need to apply now, right? It's that point you need to, trust the fish or whatever the fucking phrase would be, like whatever silly thing would happen.
Something with a pineapple, probably. But yeah. But I was thinking about that dual narrative structure because, I have something that I'm going to, like, celebrate in just like a couple of minutes. But while I was doing that thing, my father was watching an episodes of Grey's Anatomy. And remembering the fact that Grey's Anatomy has been a television show for like 20 years.
Right?
Like,
yeah.
Oh, yeah. When did Grey's Anatomy start? Let's look that up. Get out of here,
I do
Sean.
think that they're in their 18th season. I think that's what they're in is right now. So I don't know if that means that it's been on the air for 18 years. There's usually some wiggle room with that. But I do believe they're on season 18.
Oh, let's see. Because it started in 2000. They're in season 21.
21? Holy hell.
That is 100% season 21. That's crazy. Because it started in 2005. So I would the show's been on for 20 years, but I think they did like a weird truncated 2005 season. Yeah, they started in March of 2005, and then in September 2005 started the second season. So that's why they're like one ahead, because essentially their first season was split into 2 because of it being a mid-season replacement. But that show's been on for like 20 years, and I'm thinking, didn't this start around the same time as Lost? Which, 2004. So yeah, kinda. And Lost is not in its 20th season. And I think one of the reasons why is that the narrative way that Lost worked was something that would not be sustainable without huge changes.
Yeah, I also, in the grand scheme of things, genre, right? The
Oh
genre
yeah.
dictates kind of an ending it being necessary in Lost, whereas the genre of the hospital drama
Oh yeah.
actually, interestingly, has the built-in nature of never really having a definitive ending.
Right. Because people are always going to need hospitals.
And there's always going to be rotating like staff, so you can always update your cast. Stories are always going to be interesting. People are always going to be interested in medical stories. So like the hospital drama always has the potential. Wasn't General Hospital the longest running
Soap opera?
soap opera of all time,
Yes.
right? Yeah, like yeah, there's just something about the hospital drama setting that just allows that shit to just go on forever.
Yeah.
ER.
I mean, yeah, General Hospital is still running, and it started in 1963. So you bring up a
Yeah.
good point. I certainly hope that Grey's Anatomy isn't still going on in 2075.
You know, yeah, more power to him.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I don't watch the show, and it doesn't really offend me that my father does. But it's one of those things I was just like reminded this is still a show, isn't it?
I think that if you were, if you were in our generation in the 2005 era, if you weren't watching it, you certainly had friends that were, right? It was one of those shows. Again, much like we were saying with Cheers earlier, like it was one of those shows for a hot minute where like you had to be watching Grey's Anatomy or you had to at least be hearing about it from people. And like, so I definitely have had groups of friends in my life that I've come in and out of that have been Grey's Anatomy people, and I've gotten weird swaths of that show. Like I've watched like season 1 through 3, and then like season like 10 through 13 or some shit. Like it was like weird moments of that show. I think at some point, Ellen Pompeo, that's the lead there,
That's
right? Didn't she
Grey.
leave
That's
the show
Meredith
for a
Grey.
while?
Yeah, yes, she did.
And then she came back, but like Grey's Anatomy didn't have a Grey in it for a while.
Yeah. It's weird. It's weird. I don't. You talk about like groups of friends. That was sort of. I mean, let's talk about Grey's Anatomy. Could definitely be a borderline moment in my life, like talking canon events, because the people I was still friends with after high school, and you've met some of them. It was that day when they're like, "Oh yeah, we're all getting together to watch Grey's Anatomy," or I'm like, maybe I don't have as much in common with these people as I once did. And then I
Yeah.
meet you right as the second season starts, and we're still talking 20 years later. But people that I had been in high school with, I haven't even thought of. I know the names of the people that I'm talking about, and I remember distinctly the motivation to watch Grey's Anatomy was because my coworkers watch it, and I want to be able to talk with them about it. And then me just being like, "Oh, that sounds like hell, right?"
Yeah.
You work at Walmart, and because of that, you got to watch Grey's Anatomy. How'd that timeline work out? I'm still struggling.
I mean, to be fair, it's part of the reason that I started watching Once Upon a Time and fell in love with it. So,
And Once Upon a Time was enjoyable.
right.
I'm sure Grey's Anatomy is enjoyable to people too. Last thing I'm going to say before I got nothing but accolades to celebrate and things to share and other stuff to talk about. Dr. Odyssey came back. It was a 2-part. They said it was a shark attack 2-parter, but then it turns out the second part was orcas attacking the ship. I'm not going to be talking about
Man.
Dr. Odyssey.
Oh man.
I said I wasn't
Wow.
going to talk about it anyway, but oof. Like
The shark of sharks, the orca.
The orca. And Don Johnson had like the only vessel I ever lost was because of an orca attack. So his white whale was a black and white whale.
Nice.
Yeah, thanks. That's what I said during the show. Yeah, it was that show the last new episode aired November 21st, 2024, before coming back on March, I think 4th is when it came back, or 5th. Last Thursday is when it came back. It doesn't, I can do I guess the 6th, because then 13,
Okay.
yeah. March 6th is when it came back. Good for me. And I had thought that one of the reasons that they shuttered the show for almost 4 months was to like rework it a little bit. That is not the case.
I wonder if they're shifting towards it being more of a summer show. Like I wonder if they keep pushing back like the show a little bit, they can justify it being a summer program at some point.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's gotten renewed for a second season or anything like that. We waited specifically to have both of the shark episodes because I knew that the cliffhanger would be bullshit and just infuriate me. Yeah, this is the most we're going to be talking about it. Unless it blows me away, because I'm still watching it, I can't imagine I'm going to be talking Dr. Odyssey the way that I was before.
Well, then let's talk about good stuff.
Let's talk about good stuff. You know what happened this past Monday, Sejohn? It was March 10th, Monday? If that helps.
It was March what?
It was March 10th.
Mario Day.
It was Mario Day. And how did you celebrate your Mario Day, Sejohn?
The same way I celebrate all Mario Days, by completely forgetting about it and then eventually playing a Mario game in that week because I'm intrigued. So I forgot about it and then eventually played some Mario Rabbids eventually later in the week.
Look at that. I like that. I like that a lot. That's beautiful. Where did I find it? So I woke up. I try not to do anything special for Mario Day. It's just a thing that exists. But I woke up to a, by their own admission, random question from my friend who lives in Taiwan. Here's quoting him. Random question. Has anyone tried to bring back Mario 35 or something similar online? And I'm like, not random. Totally the right question to ask me, especially on March 10th. So I did a little Googling, and I found smb35server.com. Turns out there's a continued interest group in Super Mario 35 that have built their own server. And I am happy to report to the class and to you as the TA, Sejohn, I played Super Mario 35 5 years after its discontinuation to celebrate Mario Day.
Is this like the more niche version of like if a thing is popular, there's always a zine. If a game is beloved enough, there's always a server running.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, especially they're tearing down Star Wars Bounty Hunter. That was the announcement yesterday. The free-to-play looter shooter games as service model thing. I don't know if you ever played it. Someone asked me to play it, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to be doing that, but thank you. It came out, it's shuttering its doors, I think, October of this year. I like that they give you enough time to, like, know that the game's going to be ending, but, like, you're stupid if you spend money on the game now, right? Like, yeah. Like, don't give money to something that's you're not gonna be able to play. Of course, then there are always these people who somehow set up servers and find ways to keep them alive. Maybe, right? I was surprised. Like, this is something I had seen talked about before, as like we're gonna try to do this, but then it didn't work. Like, it did not work. So finding it again and then like putting in the effort. The hardest part about it is that you can't have an integrated graphics chip. That's the craziest thing to me. So like switching over to these mini computers that you and I have switched over to, you cannot play Super Mario 35 on it, on the server.
Why?
I believe it's because it detects that the game is playing. The whole thing feels like sticks and twigs and bits of twine and gum keeping it all together. It works, so it can't.
The old days of the internet. Yeah, I love it.
I took part in and they do a weekly tournament, and I took place in 2 of the matches yesterday. I got 7th place because these are some people who've been playing the game since it like went offline. Like they have 5 more years of Super Mario 35. And also, you know, it's getting back into it, remembering it's a different way to play the game of Mario Brothers in Super Mario 35. Like prioritizing coins and prioritizing kills, taking your time in levels that you can beat in like 10 seconds, right? To like make sure you've built up an inventory. I'm retraining my mind to play Super Mario 35 again. But the whole thing, it works on like a Shoutbox server, and, you know, I'm in their Discord. When somebody starts a game, I get a notification. And then, like, basically you have 90 seconds to open up the game and try to join at the same time to play against those people. And right now, the continued interest community for Super Mario 35 is roughly 20 people. It's not even 35 people interested in it. So if you're somebody who likes Super Mario 35, I can walk you through. Contact me right on the side. I'm still on Twitter at Devon D. Decker. I would love to walk you through how to set it up because there is a strong community, and it'd be great if there could be 35 people in it. And it works. And it's really crazy that it works. I cannot believe that I got to play Super Mario 35 this week. I played it this morning. I'm not even going to lie to you. I did a match this morning. So it's a thing that is out there, and I can't believe it. I'm very excited.
Oh, I did play something in Mario oriented on Mario Day because they posted a bunch of new Game Boy games on Mario Day, right?
Yes, they did. Only
I
one
played
of them
Mario
has
Picross.
Mario's title, though.
I played Mario Picross, and it was a blast.
I love Mario Picross. It's a great game.
It's been available in the NES stuff for a while, in the Japanese, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is the translated one that came out on the Game Boy Advance, and it is
it's just regular Game Boy, isn't it? It's not Game Boy.
Oh, it's regular Game Boy?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, Picross is regular Game Boy. It's Tetris DX that was the advanced game, wasn't it? No. That was also regular
Tetris
Game Boy.
DX is the Game Boy Color game.
Game Boy Color.
I don't remember the DS version of Tetris. I owned it, but I don't remember the name of it. I'm looking it up right now. Why not?
Yeah, but it's the Game Boy Color one because that's the one where they
Tetris
utilize color and shapes and stuff to give you a little bit more information about what's going on the screen. It's wild.
Yeah. That's great.
But
They
yes,
also
I played
dropped
Mario
the
Picross.
Donkey Kong, the 1994 Donkey Kong game for Game Boy, which is one of the greatest games ever. You think it's just going to be Donkey Kong the arcade game, and then you clear the arcade game, and then there are 92 more levels for you to explore, culminating in a fight with a giant Donkey Kong. Some spoilers, but it's awesome. You play on there's an airplane level. You talk about biomes in video games, and you got the jungle, the ocean stage, the fire stage, the ice stage. They do airplane. I can't think of a lot of airplane levels. Storm Eagle and Mega Man X.
Well, Mario famously does the air levels with the flying ships and stuff.
Right, yeah, in Super Mario Brothers 3. So it makes sense. But even those, they have a ship aesthetic. It's not something modern. It's very clearly that Donkey Kong 94 is set in modern times.
Interesting. Wild.
Yeah. Yeah, you start in a modern New York. It's very cool. So that's it. Anything else you want to make sure we talk about? Day the Earth Blew Up. Have you seen it?
No, I want to go. I can't believe it's playing in theaters. It was such a surprise. So I'm going to go see it. I'm going to go see if I can find it in theaters.
Yeah, I was going to see Novocaine. I intend to see it this week. I have a whole plan to go see The Day the Earth Blew Up. I'm very excited. By all accounts, I don't think it's going to do much more than $5 million in its opening weekend. So if this is the test to see if traditional animation can still get bums in seats, I don't think it's doing its job.
Yeah, I think it's more of a thing for them trying to figure out what they can be doing with the Looney Tunes. I do think looking at traditional animation stuff, but it is a test also for whether or not the Looney Tunes format works a large scale, right? Because this isn't like a Space Jam where you're doing something unique and different that you don't see. This is, by all accounts, just a longer Looney Tunes feature, and so I am really excited to see it. But I agree with you that I think it's not doing gangbusters in the ways in which it's not. I don't think it's going to change much in the industry, which is a bummer because I would love for them to really crack into doing some just good old fashioned Looney Tunes, but feature length wise, that is wild. There's also something about this one that also has a little bit of a Duck Dodgers vibe to it. I'm not going to lie. That's part of the appeal for me.
Oh, yeah, I get that. The thing that I've enjoyed most about it, having not seen it yet, is that it's bringing back a lot of people talking about Looney Tunes back in action. Because with the alien part of that, there's a huge alien side to that movie, and it's Brendan Fraser. So, of course, I'm excited to have them talk about that. The reminder.
I am bummed because it's just occurring to me. I had heard something a while back about there being Looney Tunes movie news, and I had been so excited because I thought it meant that there might be some movement on Coyote versus Acme, but it must have been on this.
Yeah. I mean, if this had done better, maybe, but also it's Ketchup Entertainment that's distributing it. And do you remember the other Ketchup Entertainment film? We did a whole episode on it, Sejohn.
I do remember the title card, but I don't remember what movie it was for.
Hellboy the Crooked Man, which is currently on Hulu. If you got a Hulu thing, watch Hellboy the Crooked Man. I'm a big fan of it. I don't know why, like everybody. And I feel it's so strange because I talked about earlier, everybody hated the Powerpuff Girls thing, and I don't get it. Like, and on some level, it must sound like I'm just a contrarian, but legitimately, these are things that I watch in a vacuum. I watched Hellboy the Crooked Man without knowing anything about the film or how people felt about it, and enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. It talked about folklore that I have stuff on. So then I'm like surprised when I step into the world and find everybody hates this thing. Like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, it would be one thing if I were ultimately seeking out things that people hated in order to give them a chance. But no, I'm watching things, I'm enjoying them, and then finding out, yeah, nobody liked that. Maybe keep your voice down. That people
I don't know. I mean, part of it is because, again, we when we say nobody, we are talking about the internet. The internet is not everybody.
Yeah, the internet
I think that's
everybody.
an important thing to remember. But then, like, the other side of that is also just as we've kind of talked about it earlier in this episode, just it's the ways people react to things now. It's like everything is a negative until it's a positive, and that sucks. Nothing is given a chance to be positive. It always is assumed negative until it comes out, and then maybe by chance it like changes people's minds. But there isn't anything I can think of that's come out recently where people thought, oh, this could be good. Everything has always been, well, this is going to be shit, and then they go and see it, and it wasn't as shit as I thought. It's like basically the game loop now for everything.
I think pre-sales for tickets coming into the conversation is the biggest offender for that. Like, the fact that right now Disney's like, oh, Snow White's going to fail because they haven't pre-sold a lot of seats is so crazy for me. I mean, I don't know if we're going to talk about Snow White. CJ and I have to talk about that once we finish this episode. But, like, that's what people are judging it on, is that it hasn't pre-sold enough tickets. Like, when did that become a metric that mattered? If you know, like, an exact date, I'd like to know. Because I don't get it.
Yeah, I have no idea. But, like, this idea that not only are we not selling enough on the first weekend, we're not selling enough on the weekend before the first weekend is crazy.
Yeah, like, it's like, of course you're gonna, like, a lot of people are not built to buy their tickets in advance, right? A lot of people just go to the movie theater and pick a movie.
Yeah.
More people than you'd think. Like, it's weird to me how many times I've been at the movie theater and someone has asked me, yo, what should I see today? Like, what do you mean? Why are you at the movie theater without a plan of something to see? Who does that? I just don't get it. Yeah. So, like, as a society, we're not really programmed to pre-buy tickets. So then it has to have been one of the Star Wars, right? Like, I think Last Jedi sold out like fucking crazy. I remember The Force Awakens. I bought my tickets day of.
Yeah.
But then it changed. Something changed after that.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that the Disney animated to live action, like, movies that they've done have done traditionally pretty well pre-sale wise, so that's probably where the Snow White of it all is coming from, is that they're looking at other live action remakes of animated movies that Disney has done, because that's an entire genre unto itself now. There's more than enough to classify them on their own, and they've looked at what those movies did, and they're not seeing the same kind of pre-sale stuff that they saw on the more successful versions of those. I think is probably what they're talking about.
Oh, there we go. That makes sense. Thank you for giving me something like that I can tangibly interact with. Because, I mean, Snow White seems like a whole other thing. Again, we're going to talk about it afterwards, but I don't know. I do not know how to feel about that one. But it's the most recent one where everybody is like, this movie's going to fail. Though they've been saying that since the first trailer. So it just feels like because they set out to prove something, they're finding the evidence that supports that initial thing. Where at the same time, the fact that there are any pre-sales based on what we know about this movie kind of surprises me Like that, there are still people who want to see this movie.
Yeah, I don't know. I know a lot of people that are not big in the the scene like we are. Like they're not behind the scenes on a lot of this stuff, so they just have pretty fresh opinions on a lot of things, and I depend on them a lot for making sure that I'm getting things right about what everybody else is feeling, because I know that I don't always understand what
Right,
everybody else is
exactly.
feeling
We live
either.
in different
Um,
bubbles, man. Like,
and yeah, and like and we had a whole conversation this week about how they're just really just not interested in Snow White. It's just not one that really grabs them. Like plain and simple. No, nothing about controversies, nothing about like the way that it looks or their feelings about Disney in general. Just entirely just like, nah, not in on that one. And so like I'm curious to see how it does in that regard, because like I could see that being a kind of a marker for a lot of people. Snow White's just not one that a lot of people talk about as being hugely important to them. It's not like Little Mermaid is one that I would say, especially in maybe it's people around our age
mm-hmm.
specifically, but Little Mermaid is one that really seems to be definitive for a lot of people, really like life defining for a lot of people. So like when they remade that, people had a lot of strong nostalgic opinions about that and things like that. This one just seems like people are just like just bored. So I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
Little
I'm
Mermaid
curious to see
kicks
how it
off the
goes.
golden age of Disney animation, right? All of those have gotten it, right? Like that 4-movie track there, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King have gotten their live action remakes. So then you're also got to look like this is going back to a film that released in what, 1937? Is that when Snow
Yeah.
White came out? Like, and the Seven Dwarfs. Talk about, yeah, 37 is when the original one came out. It is the first Disney animated feature film. I remember my mother being excited when it came out on VHS because she could finally show it to me. Because she's like, I saw it a bunch. She had seen it a bunch of times, and all it was relegated to me was like the songs that they featured in Disney sing-along songs tapes.
Yeah, right.
So like I never got to sit down and watch the full movie, and then bringing it to VHS for the first time was a huge deal. But even then, like I don't think it hit the same cultural touchstone as like The Little Mermaid for our generation, right? And our
Right,
generation, kind of the generation that right now is going to movie theaters, right? Or we're right on the
right.
cusp past that, right? Like I'm about to be 40, so like that's when they start to not really listen to my opinion anymore, right? It's that powerful 21 to 39-year-old demographic. Oh, I've just made
Yeah, man.
myself sad.
I think I, I think that it's one of those ones that's really important in like the canon, right? I think there's like a lot of history behind Snow White, and I think it's important that like it be talked about and preserved and mentioned still and all that sort of stuff. I don't know if this movie's going to properly celebrate that stuff, and a lot of that coming down to that they're basically like burying this movie now because of all the weird controversies and shit that have gone on around it. So like it's this movie's it's not starting in a good place. But I think it's a perfect example though, because like you said, people have been shitting on this movie since day one. In some ways, it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's been the very nature of just all this negativity on this movie from day one has only let us dig into and highlight all the negative shit, because shit happens on all movies that get made, right? But we don't hear about it on every movie, but we certainly heard about it on this one.
I mean, one of the only reasons that I even care about Snow White anymore is that somebody who went through the same theater program as the two of us, who has won a Tony, is in the movie. Like, that's crazy. Like, can you imagine somebody from URI Theater going on to be in a Disney movie?
Yeah, man, it's the dream.
Right? It's the dream, but I don't know. I don't know how it happened. It feels like the exception to the rule. Like, I don't think that URI Theater is producing Disney stars. That's me, though. That's my way of looking at it. So it's crazy. Then that's it. And like other than that, I'm Snow White is something that my mother cared about, but she's not like, are we gonna go see Snow White? Right? And I think that's
Yeah.
because I don't even know. I bet if I asked her after this recording, I will report back next week. She's gonna be like, "What do you mean there's a new Snow White? What do you mean? Do I want to go see the new Snow White movie? I want to see Alto Nights with Robert De Niro, Devon. I know you want to see Alto Nights, Mom. I talked about it on the podcast. All right. Anything else? Because I have one last thing that I want to announce.
No, let's do it.
All right. The first game that I ever really speed ran, right, like where I would call it speed running, was Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers for the NES. Beautiful little Capcom game. And it has come to my attention that on May 17th, Best of Ness, I think, is the group that's doing it. I should have had this prepared beforehand. I feel like a bad speedrunner. Where is it? Sejohn, fill for me.
Speedrun the internet. Speedrun your Googling. You can do it. I believe in you.
Thank you. You're super helpful.
I don't know what to fill the time with here because I appreciate that Chip and Dale has come up more than once in this episode. I'll point.
Yeah,
that
I'm
out.
glad that you brought it up. Here it is. Dude, Chip and Dale 2. Nobody likes Chip and Dale 2.
Yeah.
I mean, no, some people
do.
I just don't like that game.
Is Chip and Dale 2 the reskinned one, or is Chip and Dale the reskinned one?
Well, no, Chip and Dale on the Sega Genesis is a reskin of a game.
Oh, okay.
Chip and Dale 2 is a unique Capcom game. All right. So it's Best of Ness who's doing it. Saturday, May 17th, time to be determined. And it is a knockout one night only tournament of Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers on the NES. And I am announcing that I am starting training on St. Patrick's Day. I'm giving myself 2 months to train because I intend to participate in this knockout one night only tournament. So the Twitch streams of Devon Decker are going to be live. So twitch.tv/Devon Decker, you can come watch me train on Chip and Dale NES. This is a game that for a long time on my resume, it said that I could beat Chip and Dale on the NES in 17 minutes. I know that I've brought that down a little bit, but yeah, it's a conversation starter as a special skill.
Nice.
So I'm going to get back into it, and I have a whole little training regimen planned for it. So that's my big thing. That's starting on the 17th. So again, twitch.tv/Devon Decker if you want to stop by and watch. But I think that's it, right, Sejohn? Nothing else to talk about? All right.
No, let's send this one home.
Well, before we send it home, nature just called, and I got the chance to ask my mother. She is aware there's a new Snow White movie. But to quote her, it's because it's surrounded by controversy. So I don't know. Maybe it's working. Who knows? No, there's no such thing as bad publicity, though Snow White's getting kind of close. Anywho, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Say Report. If you want to keep the conversation going, you can join our Discord. Invitations are available wherever we are on social media, which as of this release is still Facebook and X, formerly Twitter. You know, when we talk about Snow White off mic, maybe we discuss that stuff too, Sejohn. Who knows? So you can get an invitation if you just go to the Say Report on Facebook or X. Also, if you just want to get a specialized invitation directly from us, feel free to shoot an email to thesayreport@gmail.com. Or if the Discord thing is just a little bit too much for you to handle, we'll just correspond with you like it's the 2000s. You can just send emails to thesayreport@gmail.com. But remember, if it's for me, Devon Decker, or him, Sejohn Sarwick, just put our first name in the subject line, and we will make sure that it is distributed appropriately. With no further ado, thanks for listening to the show, and William, please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Sarwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.